this coming array of CentreCourt cities. We are in spectacular places again with great schools, great deans, great admission directors, and the upper crust of the applicant pool. Matt, what do you think?
Well, with that many adjectives, John, it sort of, we should have been taking those classes in the luxury MBA management, right? Which will be part of the discussion for this webinar. But yeah, it's going to be great to get back on the road in 2018. We had, 32 of the world's top 40 schools with us last year. And they're back again this year, starting with London on Saturday, the 3rd of March. We're not actually allowed to publicly announce where we are, but as we both know, it's the most famous modern art museum in London on the South Bank, which, as you say, gives a great edge for the sort of face-to-face sessions that we'll have, and all of those panels with deans, admissions directors, to really give the Poets and Quants audience the inside track to business schools. So we hope that all of you within traveling distance of London can join us on the afternoon of March 3rd, and we'll then be streaming some of those different sessions on Facebook Live on the Poets and Quants site. So it'll be great to get the year started with that. And of course, we're now waiting for the FT to publish their MBA results on Monday. Some surprises in there. There has been some movement. And I know that John will be producing really the reference in terms of analyzing those results and what they mean for the market. This webinar was going to look at one of the most one of the busiest areas, I think, of the MBA market, John, in terms of if we go back 110, 120 years with the general management MBA as Harvard and others conceived of it. But it has been in the specialized market that we've seen, program launches. Even last year, the likes of NYU Stern with their fashion MBA and their tech MBA. Now, did you know what you wanted to do when you were 25 years old, some 15 years ago?
Yeah, I pretty much knew I wanted to be a journalist. But
well,
I'm unusual. I was very directed, and I kind of knew what I wanted, and I went for it. And I think they gave me an advantage, but I think the average 25-year-old, 27-year-old may not know. And, the beauty of a really good MBA program is that there are lots of options. In addition to these specialized degrees that are popping up everywhere, even within the traditional MBA format, you can concentrate or focus on a specific area. And many schools even allow you to customize a choice that you might want to do yourself through independent study, by putting together a bunch of electives and creating a whole new area.
That's right. I guess it speaks to the idea of sort of generalized versus specialized and the career choices. And there's no one fit solution, right, in terms of individuals and the career path that they really want to pursue. I think background matters, and very often, with the traditional general MBA program, particularly 2-year programs, we see that sort of career switch where maybe the functional specialist, whether it's the engineer that then wants to broaden those business skills to then be able to pursue more strategic roles in the upper levels of management of a company. Versus those that really do have now on the top of my head, John, I can't think of a 2-year program that's launched in the last 20 years. We've seen schools getting into the fray with 1-year programs, but in a very crowded marketplace. I guess the specialized MBA has been a route that a number of schools have taken, just as a way of addressing a particular niche and finding their place, right?
True. And you mentioned NYU, and that's a good, real latest example, right? And there are areas that are extremely hot in data analytics, digitization. You mentioned luxury. That's a whole other area that a lot of people are very much interested in. Supply chain, logistics. There are a ton of areas now where you can go and get a specialized MBA or even a specialized master's in that specific area, which obviously in the specialized master's option, It's always accelerated. It can be 10 months to 1 year. It tends to be cheaper. It probably gives you a lot less of the core that you would traditionally get in an MBA program. And I'm talking about finance, accounting, statistics, operations, marketing, strategy, leadership. But it would give you terrific skills to immediately get a job, a good job at a high rate of pay, and immediately jumpstart into the work, which is a big deal.
Well, if we take a couple of the examples that you just gave and some of those sort of hot topics, because all of the great business schools offer a whole array of electives. Of course, for the 2-year programs, you then have more time to select those electives and in some states specialize within the general MBA in your second year. But what are your thoughts? I mean, if you took 2 or 3 business analytics electives at one of the top schools versus, heading to some of these programs that have launched Masters in Business Analytics in the last 2 or 3 years, who's then in a better position in the current job market?
I think if you have a master's in data analytics, it's such a hot area, and that's what you want to do, that's much better option than taking a general MBA and taking a few courses. Because number one, all the coursework will be centered around data analytics, so probably will be an experiential component that will bring you into contact with a major project where you have to really take tremendous amounts of data and make it useful for decision making. You may lose that in the general MBA program. And to the extent that a school has strong career management support on a specialized master's, they're going to set you up with a slew of companies that are looking for exactly what you just went through. The challenge, I think, is do you know what you really want to do? And is it that specific? Because the other question is, you may want to do data analytics now, but ultimately you want to be a general manager and a senior leader in the company, and you may want to go back and get an MBA later on, or you may just evolve in the company depending on how your career path plays out. So if you know what you want to do, and you want to do supply chain, you want to do data analytics, you want to do marketing, one of these other fields, it doesn't hurt to go and do the 1-year degree program, specialize, and take advantage of a really deep and profound knowledge base in that field.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about career trajectory, and this is something that we spend a lot of time on when we're talking to inquirers at Fortuna. In your early 20s, where there is sometimes that opportunity to already specialize, that there's sometimes that sort of disconnect on the timeline where you're also hoping through the MBA to sort of jumpstart, and we'll have candidates talk about how they want to shoot for the C-suite, which is a great ambition, and to have those sort of senior executive leadership positions, but for the enormous majority, those are not the sort of positions that are then available to them as they come out of business school. And it's interesting listening to some of the deans that you've sat down with at the CentreCourt events that talk about, where completing the 1 or the 2-year MBA, many of those graduates would be well served, perhaps with 3 or 4 years of consultancy, where they'll, look at a broad range of industries and sectors, or just getting their feet wet in industry, to really then be able to build on that. And it's in the 4, 5, 6 years out of business school that they would then be able to aspire to those more senior level positions. So when you go back to business school, I think can very often play a determining role in the sort of focus that you might want to put on it. You mentioned marketing. You mentioned supply chain. Schools like Kellogg or MIT Sloan that come to mind. Now, they have a general management MBA, and yet anybody that's looking for a great marketeer would probably include Kellogg MBA graduates on their recruitment list, and similarly for Sloan. So, when a school has such a strong reputation in a particular field, and we can come up with a long list, for finance and other sectors. So is that good enough? If you come out of Wharton with your MBA, you don't need a master in finance, right, to then break into financial services.
Yeah, that's totally true. And here's the advantage, and here's the disadvantage. So the MBA is going to cost you more money, and it may mean 2 years instead of one, although there are plenty one-year programs. But the advantage of the MBA is coming out of that, you're not going to be perceived as a data jockey, and you may be perceived that way out of a data analytics master's specialty program. However, you're going to be better prepared to do real data analytics and make a real go of it than you probably would out of a general MBA program. The dirty little secret, too, that I should mention about specialty master's programs is this. You can go to a really good school, and it's going to be a lot easier to get into that school, and especially master's program, than in a flagship MBA, where the acceptance rates are going to be the lowest, the GMAT requirements are going to be the highest, and they're going to be looking a lot more at work experience, undergraduate institution, your GPA. It's not that it's an easy ride to get into a really good specialty master's program. It isn't, but it's a hell of a lot easier than getting into an elite MBA program. And there are a lot of specialty master's programs out there. So it's shorter, it's cheaper, it's more directed and focused, and it's easier to get into. And the job outcomes are exceedingly good.
So we're recording this webinar in a week where many of the world's political, business, NGO leaders are in Switzerland and in Davos and all whining and dining and sharing their ideas. But of course, there's been this sort of general idea that maybe we've seen a vacuum of leadership. Well, in some cases, maybe we've seen too much leadership. But always this idea that starting with business, they're always looking for talent for that pipeline. To succession plans for the C-suite, whether that's at GE or at the NGO. And I suppose Philip, who's following us for this webinar, asks a great question in terms of which type of MBA gives you the best chances of reaching the C-level in a large organization. Philip, I would firmly say that it's the general MBA, certainly from one of the top schools, given that holistic learning. I mean, it's almost like the liberal arts education, where the critical reasoning and a way of thinking. Schools like Darden would argue that after you've covered 320 cases in the 21 months of the program, you're pretty much set to land on your feet in any variety of industries or situations. But there's a great interview I think that you did with Andrea Massini from HEC Paris that just talks about businesses' need to fill that pipeline of talent and leadership, and the general MBA really does a great job. One of the challenges for anyone looking at business school and bringing in those issues of ROI and career placement that all play such a big role, I guess, is trying to make a prediction about the future job market, because it's not just where we are today. If you go back 10 years, heading to business school, getting your MBA, if you wanted a career in tech, those tech firms were resolutely anti-MBA, right? I mean, you live in the Bay Area, you sort of saw this firsthand. Since the financial crisis, we've seen the appetite of Google, Amazon, Facebook. These guys can't scoop up enough of the talent coming out of the top business schools. So, even tech has been won over in a very specialized industry, but needs that sort of general business education to then be able to, successfully manage that business.
And let's face it, the CEOs of Apple, Microsoft, and many, many, many other companies, Google, have MBAs today. So Tim Cook at Apple from Duke, the new CEO from Microsoft from Chicago booth, and it just goes on and on from there. The MBA is highly respected, and you can, particularly in a 2-year program where you have more latitude, specialize. Here's another thing I think about the MBA. when you apply, there's this little trick where admissions expects you to know exactly what you want. And a lot of people pretend to know what they want when they really don't. So if you go into a 2-year program, that first year for you, despite that pretense of pretending that I'm going to do this when I get my MBA, and my MBA is going to help me do this, when you apply, you can experiment a little bit. And you may find, and a lot of people do, that they hated finance. The last thing they want to do is finance, but they get into a finance class, they begin to love it, and they come out investment bankers. And then there are people who in other fields who think they're going to return to the field where they were pre-MBA, and they completely change their minds and do a career switch. When you have a 2-year MBA program, that's another advantage because you can, in your second year, really dig deep into a lot of electives. If you really want to specialize, I think it's a good idea to get on the website of a school, look at the course catalog, and see how deep the offerings are in something you might be interested in. Now, one word of caution there. These courses may not be available at exactly the time when you need them, in the year that you need them, because there are sabbaticals and there are schedules and all kinds of things like that. But the course catalog, most schools have online, and it really gives you a sense of how deep the expertise is on any given faculty. So if you're interested in derivatives, if you're interested in digital marketing, if you're interested in strategy formulation, go and see how deep the electives are, build yourself a little spreadsheet, compare your target schools against each other, and above and beyond a ranking, a brand, whether you're admitted or not, make that a sort of a metric for your choice. That's my advice.
I think as you talk about the course catalog, also, we're looking at sort of faculty strength, and some of these schools will have already specialized master's programs, MScs, that I think would already imply a level of sort of deep knowledge in those areas. Even location plays into this one. I mean, we talked earlier about the luxury MBA. It's no surprise that the likes of HEC Paris, of course, has a program like that.
One of the best by far.
There's MIP and Bocconi in Milan, and of course it would be NYU that has just launched the fashion MBA. So location clearly makes a difference. But I think getting a sense for not just faculty expertise, but the sort of industry connections. I mean, some when we look at the list, is it Henley in the UK that has a music industry MBA? And of course, the promise there is that they're going to put you in front of executives from EMI and presumably festival and concert operators. I mean, the music industry is undergoing rapid change, right? When we used to listen to Frank Sinatra on vinyl, I'm actually going back to that period, right? I'm filling up the collection all over again. But you're also taking a bet. Bordeaux and the wine and spirits MBA. I read that there was a horse racing MBA, which sounds like a gamble, if you can excuse the pun. But that would speak to individuals that are truly passionate about where they want to head. Now, Piyush asks a great question. In terms of maybe his longer term goals would be looking at entrepreneurship. So if he was to target, sort of a top 10 or an M7 school versus a program like Babson that of course has, sort of a decades long reputation in the area of entrepreneurship, it plays both ways, right? Babson will really focus on the entrepreneurial skill set, but when it comes to raising venture capital, an MBA coming out of Harvard probably has, a network and opportunities to raise those funds unlike any other. So what would you say in terms of, for a field like entrepreneurship, better to stay with the business school that has the big brand or the school that is looking to really drill down and focus on starting your own business?
Oh boy, Matt, you asked the tough questions.
We've got some great people listening to this. They're the ones that are asking the good questions.
I got to tell you, I'm a big brand guy. The big brands have come, you mentioned entrepreneurship. So the big brands have devoted tremendous amounts of resources into entrepreneurship programming. They brought in new faculty, a lot of clinical faculty teach entrepreneurship courses. There are business plan competitions. There's money available, not only from alumni, angel investors, VCs, but from the schools themselves. So the schools have come a long way on entrepreneurship. So in the early days, you know, Babson was terrific, and Babson is still a terrific option, because the other issue here is there aren't a whole lot of people who can get into Harvard, Stanford, Chicago, Northwestern, Wharton, Columbia, et cetera, NCI, London, HSA, IESE, you name them. But all these schools now have very strong entrepreneurship programs, some stronger than others, some better than others. But brand is positive. You know, every year we do an entire ranking of the top MBA startups, and we base it on external funding, because these are all private companies. You cannot get profitability and revenue numbers, and real data is hard to get. The one number you can get is the amount of outside investment in a startup. And inevitably, guess who's at the top? Harvard and Stanford, year after year after year after year. So it's because the point you made is right. The alumni of those schools have deep pockets. They like to support each other. And you have an automatic advantage if you're going to raise money, if you're going to seek partners, suppliers, early customers. It's a true advantage.
Yeah. I'd like to come back to the point that you made earlier about, and we keep coming back to, you know, the career path that you want to follow. From, you know, Wharton, why do you want to go to business school? Why do you want the Wharton MBA? INSEAD will ask the same question. Columbia now has it down to a 50-character response of the way you see yourself, you know, coming out of business school. At the same time, admissions officers, I think, are pragmatic about the experience that you're then shipped. I mean, they themselves, you know, see very often over half of the class, even in some of the one-year programs, with students that perform this triple jump of changing geography, changing sector, changing function. So, you know, when you put together that response to an essay that talks about, you know, getting a position in strategy consulting, or, you know, starting your own business, or making one switch or another, you know, they're aware that you're going to spend 1 or 2 extraordinary years with a group of diverse, talented, open-minded, ambitious individuals. And, you know, as you say, that's when the magic happens, right? And
Yep.
you go in with one idea and will come out doing something completely different. So I'm not sure that the admissions process is flawed, which Vaibhav has asked. You know, as he points out, for many, it's difficult to know what you want to do in advance. And I think, you know, in the last 10, 20 years, you know, working for one company that for the rest of your life just is not a reality. The gig economy and how those positions will change. And schools are cognizant of that. But I think that they're looking for coherence. Certainly, they want to see, if you're about to make this massive investment in both time and in your money, that you have thought through, you know, why you want to spend the next year or next 2 years getting an MBA. And you know, they're looking for that level of sort of both coherence in that response, but also achievability. You know, if you're describing a switch and saying that you want to move into private equity or venture capital, well, unless you've got a couple of years of investment banking experience or PE already on your resume before you start business school, I think they'd be very nervous about your ability to make that transition. So, you know, they're pragmatic. And once you get into school, you know, all of those doors are open for you to then push through and pursue the career path. But we keep coming back to a job market, and we know how volatile that is. You know, the Dow is at record highs. It's not just those tech firms, but, you know, consulting firms. It's a golden age for MBA recruitment, but that may change. So, you know, if you look at sort of past experience, John, and you think about a downturn, either in a specific sector, you know, you've just got your specialized MBA, and you know, the Chinese are no longer purchasing French-made luxury goods, and, you know, that there's a drop in that market, that would leave you pretty exposed, right? So how do you sort of hedge against the ups and downs of the job market?
I don't think you can, because you don't know when a recession is going to come or not. So I wouldn't be impacted by that unless I was, let's say you get laid off, and rather than look for a new job in a recession, maybe it's your ideal opportunity to go back to school and get an MBA. That's a plus for a person. And then wait out the recession in school instead of living through it in the real world of work. I mean, that's one of the reasons why applications tend to go up when there is a recession. There's no doubt that recession is right around the corner. We've had a very long recovery here, and this is a cyclical thing. I would doubt that it's a severe recession. And unless it's a severe recession, the MBA market is pretty resilient. You know, even in the horrible downturn of 2008, 2009, when some firms were rescinding their offers and people were losing their jobs, the schools did a spectacular job in coming to the rescue of those graduates. I know Harvard, for example, even came to New York, set up an office down here to help some of its recent graduates through that difficult period. So one thing about the MBA program is the dirty little secret is the infrastructure of the program, never mind the academics, of a really good MBA is the tremendous support staff and career management that's going to help you through a crisis of this kind. You know, one other thing occurred to me that we didn't mention, and let's say you're interested in an area where there is no concentration, but you still want to explore it. And I think a couple of good examples right now might be artificial intelligence and machine learning or cryptocurrencies. These things are extremely hot in the world of business and the world of VC. But in business schools, I don't think you're going to find anyone that has a concentration in AI or cryptocurrencies. So if you have an interest in them and you want to get an MBA, how do you play the game? My advice is look for the schools that have a faculty member or 2 or 3 or 4 who have written and spoken about these topics, and actually contact them before you even contact admissions and make the kind of connection that will help you actually get into the school, and more importantly, set you up to get some deep knowledge in the field by having a mentor who's an expert in something that a school may not have a concentration in. And that's a really key way to sort of get your passion or your interest fulfilled where a school does not have a quote unquote concentration or focus.
Right. Well, now that you've mentioned it on the webinar in a public forum, you know that on Monday morning you're going to get the press release of a business school that's launching the MBA in artificial intelligence, right? As long as they're not launching one in artificial business. But I mean, it's I think great advice in terms of reaching out to faculty. And when you're showing that level of passion for a subject, as busy as some of those faculty are, I think you know, there's every chance that they would respond. Of course, in many cases, business schools are part of a wider institution. And if you look at the likes of Sloan, of course, within MIT, Tepper as part of Carnegie Mellon, you know, the GSB that can tap into the rest of Stanford University, you know, for those sort of areas that you're describing, you know, AI, who knows where that's going to be 10, 20 years from now. And that's, you know, something, the business school, there are no boundaries there. I think being able to reach out to the broader institution. There's also the idea of, so Furheen has asked about the healthcare MBA. What is it? 17% of US GDP is spent on healthcare. We're now living in a world of, you know, 4 generations sharing the planet at the same time. If Furheen asks if he gets a healthcare MBA from a great business school, does it then limit his options in landing a job outside of the healthcare industry? So maybe in tackling that question, John, you know, it's sort of extends to other industries. This is for the healthcare MBA, but would his options then be limited looking outside of that industry with a specialized MBA?
I mean, frankly, I think healthcare is the next frontier for MBAs. In the same way that technology has come on strong, particularly in the last 5 years or so, where Amazon is now recruiting 1,000 MBAs a year, I think healthcare in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be the big industry of growth for MBAs. So do you take the specialty route, or you go to a school that is at the center of the healthcare ecosystem? You get a general MBA, but you can get deep healthcare courses, and more importantly, you can get immediately connected into that field. And I would say that's the way I would go. I mean, I'm very high on the Vanderbilt Owen School in healthcare. They send more MBAs into the healthcare sector year after year than multiple MBA programs combined. They have spectacular faculty. The alumni and the connections in the healthcare field that school has is second to none. And, you know, a lot of MBAs in the past were hesitant to go into healthcare in part because it didn't pay as much as a lot of other traditional MBA fields like consulting, finance, even tech, even consumer packaged goods. That's changing. Healthcare has become such a big and important part of the US economy and economies overall. And there's a lot of startup and entrepreneurial activity, and the rewards in healthcare are immense. And so I think it's going to be a field that's going to attract a lot more MBAs. And Vanderbilt, to me, is the best positioned school, at least in the US right now, to take advantage of that field.
Right. I guess, you know, the alternative to that is to come out of the general MBA, work at one of the top consulting firms focusing on healthcare, and that would be a great path too. If you then were, you know, aspiring to executive positions in an industry you've just spent 3-4 years working, you know, on the sort of the client side, or sort of, you know, providing to the client, I think you'd be able to make that switch as well.
Agree, and that's incidentally, you know, obviously consulting is probably the #1 sector today for elite MBAs. And the beauty of consulting is you can do pretty much anything. You can work in sustainability, you can work on HR, you can work in strategy, you can work in operations, on marketing problems, on digitization. So the MBA as an entree to a specialty brings you to an elite consulting firm where you can be exposed to very different clients or different industries, and then pick your choice if you don't know what you want to do, and then dive deep within the consulting field that may ultimately land you a senior leadership position in industry after a number of years.
There's we're going to be in London for the first of the CentreCourt events this year. And I think we have pretty much every top European business school, and we've got, you know, former admissions from Harvard, Columbia. It's a great bunch of people. The panels with admissions directors from INSEAD, London Business School, Manchester Business School, my old hometown. Manchester is going to be with us, and sort of working in the other direction. There's a great piece about the captain of Belgium's national football team, soccer. Who is playing for one of the top European clubs. And of course, this is a guy, I'm assuming he earns, what do those guys earn, 120,000, 140,000 a week? And during his playing career, he's just put himself through the MBA at the Manchester Business School, because of course, he's already thinking about next steps. And you know, as confident as he could be, I'm sure he could become a soccer pundit, or open a friet store in the streets of Brussels, but you know, he wants to be able to manage his money, and he wants to be able to manage the next step of that career. So, you know, whether it's the specialized MBA or the general MBA, you know, making that investment in yourself. I know that you're a great evangelist for business education and you know, the power that it has to transform people's careers and lives. So, you know, it'll be great to meet with Manchester and all of those other top schools in London on the 3rd of March.
And I also love, here's what I love most about CentreCourt, to be honest. I love meeting our audience. And both Matt and I will be there and are totally accessible and want to meet you, talk to you, hear about your plans, your career options, what you want to achieve with your life. We're happy to give you plenty of advice, although our events are special for you. We have a genius bar, kind of like the Apple concept, where you can walk up and ask the dumbest and most embarrassing questions without consequence. And it can be about prep for a standardized test. It can be about how to apply. It can be what are my career options? What if I go to this school versus that school? It's just a great opportunity to do something that you can't do anywhere else. And then you can go to see the individual schools, meet them one-on-one. And I can tell you, I have been a fly on the wall on several admissions committees meetings where they're choosing between and among candidates and whether they'll admit them, waitlist them, or deny them. And these face-to-face meetings in different locales really mean something, because I've heard admissions committee members talk about, oh yes, I met this person at this event and I was really impressed with them. And then someone else will pipe up and say, yeah, and they came to our coffee here, and on and on and on. The other thing about CentreCourt, and I know I'm selling, but I should sell because I'm really excited about it. We are going to have some special, unique features that are just going to be plain entertainment fun. So, if you like real world TV, reality show programming, we're going to put on some reality shows for you at our CentreCourt event. Matt, why don't you talk about a couple of these? Because this is some of the parts that I'm most excited about.
Right. I think the one that stands out is the committee, and as you say, you've sort of sat in on some of those closed door sessions where they're actually crafting the diversity of next year's class. So at London, I guess, which is the first one up, we have we have an associate director from Harvard Business School, from Columbia, from London Business School, INSEAD, who will be sitting around and looking at profiles. And these will be profiles that individuals have submitted ahead of the event, and having the sort of conversations that they would have had as they were, offering places for interview or rejecting, candidates, and sort of showcasing this level of extracurricular experience. Or here would be my concern with the quant score when I see no evidence of quant on the transcript of their undergrad. These are the conversations that you've witnessed and that they were having, as they put together those classes. So I think that'll be a great sort of...
this is so cool. We're going to literally recreate the admissions committee experience and pull back the curtain on how these people talk about you from the piece of paper that they see in your application.
That's right.
And it's going to be really very revealing. And believe me, Matt and I are going to push them to the limits to really make this provocative, sharp, and let's face it, entertainment. Gotta love it. So our London event is March 3rd. So that's the closest one. And as Matt mentioned before, we can't tell you exactly where it is, but let me tell you, it's a place that as soon as you walk in, you will be transformed and you will remember for the rest of your life. Okay. Second event is in Boston on June 30th. We'll have an equally terrific place. And the Boston event is occurring at the end of the GMAC conference, where many of the deans and almost all the admission directors from all over the world will gather for that week. So there'll be a lot of people in town, and we're really looking forward to Boston, which happens to be one of my favorite cities in the world anyway. So is London, where I had the opportunity to live for 3 years. And then we're going to move over into September. We're going to be in San Francisco, LA, Houston, Toronto, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, and then we're going to totally collapse. This is kind of like a rock tour, one place after another, and we're really hoping to meet you. And like I said, we have a lot of really cool things that are going to happen at this event, things that have never occurred in this field ever before. And again, you're going to have exposure to the very top schools and the top people in them who make admission decisions.
And outside of the events, obviously being able to have those conversations, not just with the admissions officers, but very often they bring alumni with them. Nathan's written in with a an understandable question. He's having a hard time deciding which area to specialize in or focus on. Sometimes alumni, themselves can be very astute and share great insights in terms of how the program then opened up particular doors, or obviously the work with career services that you're mentioning earlier, to be able to do that 360 degree review. Right now it's almost that he's got so many sort of passions and interest that it's hard to settle on one. Well, that's a wonderful, many business schools talk about explorers in the program, and there's a big place for that, and to support you and encourage you through that. At the same time, as you put together those sort of goals in your essays, they want a degree of clarity, which shows the sort of self-reflection. So I'd certainly engage with these events, and I think reaching out to the schools and having some of those conversations with alums that can really provide some great insight and help you make some choices. But don't worry, even if you share a particular route with the business schools in your application, if that makes sense, it's compelling, it's coherent, then that's going to sparkle, that's going to resonate with the school. But if you then come back and make a shift to big pharma that wasn't mentioned in the applications, the school will be thrilled for you. They'll never hold it against you. So really look for sort of clarity and coherence. And I think that is the other element that we see with the CentreCourt events, to be able to hold those sort of conversations, just how that will give people the admissions edge. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to listen to the head of MBA admissions at LBS or INSEAD, or who have we had, Chicago Booth, Stanford at the NASDAQ Center last year. And these are very candid individuals. And as you said earlier, not just for the committee session, we'll be pushing them on those panels to move beyond that sort of politically correct answer that might go on a website, and get them to really open up. What do they see? What do they think about GMAT versus GRE? What do they think about, the one-year program versus the specialized masters that some of you guys are thinking about? So, feel free to reach out. I'm available through Fortuna. We'll all be in town in London in about 5 or 6 weeks' time, and then we'll have to make some T-shirts, John, right? With a tour schedule like that one.
Indeed, and the access is amazing. At our San Francisco event last year, for example, we had the dean of the Dartmouth Tuck School literally be at their table for 3 hours straight talking to applicants. As Matt mentioned, we had the new head of admissions at Stanford Graduate School of Business. So the quality of the schools and the seniority of the people that you have access to, you'll never have access to anywhere else. So it's a really special event. You learn a lot about the MBA landscape, what they're really looking for, what schools might match your own values and personality, and where do you have chemistry and where don't you? And it's a safe place. It's you can ask the hard questions. In fact, I encourage you to do so. You'll be admired for asking hard questions. So I'm really looking forward to this season of CentreCourt. I'm looking forward to seeing my friend Matt again on the road, and we hope to see you.
Monday, I'll be looking forward to reading your analysis of the FT's 2018 Global MBA ranking. There's a lot of movement in those results, and you're the person to be able to make sense of all of that. So thanks everyone for joining the webinar. We hope to catch you on the road very soon. And do stay in touch with the questions that you have.
Yeah, this is John Byrne with Poets&Quants for Matt in Paris and me in California in the Bay Area. Thanks for joining us.